And we know so much now about what works in relation to the details, the impact of substance abuse, and the other factors that come into play in these kids' lives. So we have undertaken massive model demonstration programs, the nitty-gritty work of this individual project that's underway. We've done so much because it is such an important issue. And I'm proud to say we haven't done it alone. We've done it in partnership, just like the partnerships that we advocate communities to engage in. Partners with HHS at the Children's Bureau, with the National Council of Juvenile Family Court Judges. We aren't in this thing alone, and we need to do this now nationally.
Well, Judge David Grossman's court in Cincinnati certainly provided a model for many other courts to emulate. Judge, your court began making changes, in fact, prior to the model court movement. What triggered your involvement in this issue, which many people believed was just too big a problem to fix?
Well, Mindy, when I first took the bench back in the 70s, I was frustrated by the fact that our court was operating in ignorance of aggregate data in this field. And also I found that the agencies themselves were operating in ignorance. The court was a passive partner in the process, really, not even a partner. There was enmity between the agencies and the courts, mistrust and suspicion. And the more I tried to get into the issues and try to find out what was what, the more I found that I couldn't do that until I collected data. And I set about doing that with some very primitive computer programs that, of course, were occurring back in those early years. We were able to fashion enough data and statistics so that we could once see the playing field. We knew then that we had a serious problem, and we also suspected that many, many courts across the country had the same problems. We started reworking our court processes, making them more efficient, more time-sensitive, front-loading the system, that is, bringing on resources early in the process so that cases would move more quickly and resolution could be achieved. We also held the agencies more accountable. We were willing to admit that we weren't set up right. We were willing to admit that we were making mistakes, but we also saw others doing the same. And we formed a trust relationship rather than an accusatory relationship that was so often the case in the past. The result of that was that the data started to inspire us to move forward. The data showed that there were gaps in processing and gaps in service systems, and those gaps could be filled by simply readjusting a lot of the resources. It also energized the community. Once they could see the data, they were much more willing to take part in finding solutions. Before that time, as you mentioned, people thought the problem was so big it was unmanageable. There's nothing you could do. But once they saw the data, then things started to flow. The result of that was that we developed a pretty sufficient and successful system. Then we were fortunate. We were tabbed by the National Council of Juvenile Family Court Judges with the funding assistance of the Attorney General of the United States and the Office of Juvenile Justice, Shea, to set about formulating a plan to develop a resource guideline. And we did that with a significant body of judges and resource people over a 3-year period and produced what is today the resource guidelines. The benefit of that document, it's a blueprint, a how-to manual for courts and systems to interact with this problem of the abused, neglected child. The result of that resource guidelines has produced also the strength of the model court movement. And the model courts would come visit. They visited us in many occasions, and they'd start visiting each other, and we'd borrow from each other. But throughout, the National Council was acting as a guiding hand. The resource guideline was the manual, and it was a very practical one because we already had good data, good time schedules. We knew how long it took us to accomplish certain parts of the hearing processes. We could deal with the problems in a very effective, practical, concrete way, which gave courts a much more confident feeling that they could, in fact, make changes instead of just sitting there passive as in the past, answering simply the crisis of the moment. The child was removed from the home, the crisis was over, and the impact of that child's life then was that they continued in a revolving foster care or temporary out-of-home care.
And now we have ended up with a system and a model of collaboration that is remarkable. And one of the partners in this collaborative arrangement is Health and Human Services and the Children's Bureau. And Joseph Semide, please forgive me for mispronouncing your name in the introduction. Joe Semide, newly come to the Children's Bureau. What is your focus in helping children in this initiative?
Well, with the increasing numbers of child abuse and neglect cases, the public at large is very concerned what's the quality of services that these children are receiving. And the President and Congress passed in 1997 ASFA, the Adoption and Safe Families Act. And there was a great deal of clarification about child welfare values and how we were going to proceed. And the values were that safety was paramount. The safety of these children, all decisions that we would make had to be with safety as the paramount focus. Second, we wanted to achieve permanency for these kids. Their psychosocial development was very important, and they needed to have a secure place, a stable caregivers. And third, we wanted the well-being of both the children and the families. So these three values, which is incorporated in ASFA, we were trying to pursue. And so we developed assistance to states and at the same time held them accountable for achieving outcomes that would increase safety, that would increase permanency, and the timeliness of decisions concerning permanency. And we also wanted outcomes for well-being. We thought that this particular initiative is well suited for the kind of collaboration that would improve the quality of services that the children receive and the families, and that we would get better decisions by having a wider network of stakeholders looking at cases and being able to have their particular point of view incorporated in a collective way of assessing that case. And I think the judge was very correct. In years past, all the systems were self-contained with very little reference or interaction with the other system. We're breaking through those barriers, and we're beginning now to have judgments that are not abstract or bureaucratic, but judgments that follow the family and the children and are able to determine in a very realistic way what do children need, how can we achieve safety, permanency, and well-being for these children in a context that is concrete in terms of their life situation, the community in which they live, and what resources we have to support these families.
We're going to be looking at a number of communities around the country throughout this broadcast. One of those areas that has seen the impact of change has been Illinois, made national headlines in the last year for making progress, significant progress in permanency. Gloria Fitzgerald with the Chicago Department of Social Services, what was done to accomplish that goal?
The Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, which is a statewide agency which I represent, has led the nation for 2 consecutive years in placing children in permanent, stable homes through adoption. In fiscal year 99, we did 7,315 adoptions, and these were completed adoptions. And that's 3 times more than the total number of adoptions in fiscal year 97. We also increased the number of children that were moved to permanency through guardianship by 72%. And these figures in 98 were 1,276 children and 2,228 in fiscal year 99. We also work very closely with our community in a community cooperative effort. We had a partnership with a lot of key people, especially with the Cook County courts. Former Cook County Court Judge Nancy Salyers displayed a great interest in placement for children. Her efforts resulted in an unprecedented increase in Cook County adoptions and guardianships. In 96, there were only 1,196. And in 1999, in Cook County, we had 7,543. We had efforts with corporate partners for recruiting adoptive families. Corporations and businesses worked in that to increase adoption awareness with a variety of audiences. And we had a special effort with our medical professional, with hospitals in regard to recruiting families.
Well, Gloria Fitzgerald, if any common theme runs throughout this broadcast, it is partnership, as you can attest to. Model courts must establish positive, collaborative relationships with all the stakeholders in the child welfare system. Our first video segment will highlight a court which has established an advisory committee whose membership includes foster parents, child protective service workers, mental health professionals, attorneys, and other representatives of the community. The committee meets on a regular basis to set priorities, initiatives, and innovative practices and monitor progress. And another critical aspect of this program is the development and implementation of the Assessment Foster Homes Initiative. The El Paso Children's Court faces unique challenges due to its proximity to the Mexican